Hi, good morning and welcome to my second video in the series of Elements of Learning. If you saw my first video on teamwork, thank you very much for the feedback on that one. This is the second video of 5 different videos. This time we're focusing on the element of communication and creation. So what does communication and creation mean? Well, it's about providing varied and powerful tools with technology to enable students to elevate their communications to professional standards, thinking really carefully about layout, organisation and particular intended audience as well. Teachers can help students to engage in expressive activities by allowing them to choose their communication tools. And that's really important as our children move through Key Stage 2, particularly into secondary. We've given them lots of foundations and basis of lots of different apps, and it's about how they then use those apps to communicate the best way they can. And it's also about encouraging students to design for a specific audience, and we do that really well in primary, maybe getting upper Key Stage 2 to think about tasks where they're communicating to Key Stage 1 or foundation stage, and it happens in a similar way across secondary as well. So what do we know about communication and creation? Well, learning can be deepened when students are asked to create products that express what they know or what they think. And this is about combining communication and creation together using the activities in meaningful ways. We're thinking about how we want the students to communicate to an intended audience. Maybe they're considering the levels of understanding that audience has already, or what they need to explain further within their presentation or product to help the audience better understand what they're wanting to express. We're providing learning opportunities that are strengthened where they select their own means of expression rather than just following a format given to them by their class teachers. We're looking for professional quality of student communications as well, using the principles of design. Now that can be done really easily on lots of different apps now, through the use of grid lines or identifying where the middle of different pages are, or through the use of columns. Those principles of design really help us to dual code information from us to the students and also students to each other as well. So this diagram is very similar to the elements of learning for teamwork, and we can see how we have low to high impact also with communication and creation as well. And as we create deeper levels of communication and creation, asking our students not only just to create products, but also to express what they know and what they think, then they can go deeper and have a much higher impact with communication and creation. So at the lower end, we may be asking students to create products to express what they know or what they think. And as we go through to medium impact, the students are creating products to express what they know or what they think. Maybe one or two of the following features might also be evidence. So students selecting their own means of expression, students design their expression for a particular audience, or students must attend to the principles of design. At the higher end, with much greater impact, students should be using all 3 of those different features within their outcome and their product. So let's look at some examples of how we can really express communication and creation using 3 different products. We're going to look at iMovie, Pages, and GarageBand. And a reminder that these products, yes, whilst they're Apple products, it can be also completed with similar products for Microsoft and Google as well. Let's start off with iMovie. So here we want our students to create a product in iMovie, and students have been set the task to send a text to the editor of a local newspaper expressing support for plans for a new city park. Now with iMovie, the students could create a persuasive video, still for the editor of the local newspaper, expressing their support for the new city park, but giving them that element of making a persuasive video changes the product, but also changes the purpose of that product as well. Using those elements of persuasion within that communication strand is really important here. Let's consider Pages, and let's think about how we're going to create a product specific to an audience. So Year 6 have been using Pages to create a personal narrative storybook to tell key information and stories from their own lives. and they submit their work to their class teacher. How about if we flip that around a little bit and using Pages, the Year 6 students create their personal narrative storybook to tell information about their lives, but then they share their stories with children in the foundation stage at their school. The audience here is going to be very different to their class teacher, and they're going to have to think about how they communicate their ideas across to those much younger children in the foundation stage. Still using the same elements, still using the same app, but this time their audience is very different. Finally, let's consider means of expression. And for this example, you can see that both Pages, iMovie and GarageBand have all been recommended. Let's start off at the lower end first, where we have given the students in Year 6 a Pages narrative to write, just like on the previous slide. And students are required to write their narrative, and then they can choose whether they hand it in on Pages or handwritten. Let's extend that task now. And students use Pages to create their personal narrative storybook to tell key information as before. But this time, the students can choose how they express their personal narrative. They can choose whether it's a written essay or an illustrated book in Pages. Maybe it's an interactive keynotes presentation, or maybe it's a song in GarageBand. Their outcome needs to be adequately and effectively be able to communicate their story. But it's down to them what app they choose and how they choose to present it, as long as it fits the brief of sharing that story. This is really important here, where the children can choose their own means of expression. Let's return to Pages, but this time let's explore principles of design. And the students are using Pages to create a story about an event that might have taken place in history, so for example the Great Fire of London. Let's extend that task now to try and bring in some principles of design as well. And the students have been given a newspaper template in Pages to create the front page of an edition that might have been written in the 1600s on a topic appropriate to that period. So it could be the Great Fire of London. The students are required to use conventions of newspaper articles to create their product. And it's about how they use those conventions, along with the principles of design, that show they have a good understanding of layout and form within that Pages documents. As with all the elements of learning, there are some key questions that we need to ask ourselves right at the planning stages. So here are the guiding questions for communication and creation. First of all, we need to consider the students creating products to express what they know or what they think, and what those products might be. Are the students asked to communicate to a specific external audience? And if so, who is that audience? Are students able to select their means of expression? And what choices have they got available? In addition, what skills have they got available to use those different means of expression? Are students asked to work within the guidelines or practices of a professional context? And if so, what are they? For example, writing the newspaper article that we've just seen. All of these key questions, along with the features of the elements of learning for communication and creation, have been taken from that Apple eBook as previously mentioned. Let's look at some further examples where the workflow here is being used across a number of Apple apps, and again these could be used in other apps as well, like Google apps too. So here we want the children to create a speech based on some historical speeches that they may have researched, and they could be used in the Notes app to note down some powerful techniques that they've observed from famous speeches. They can use the Apple Podcast to download famous speeches and listen back to them. Maybe there's a common theme that they're exploring with those. They could use Safari to research historical contexts and interpretation of those different speeches. And finally, they could use keynotes to rehearse and then record the speech for the class's powerful speeches keynotes. A real nice workflow there, thinking very carefully about communication as we go through, and obviously there'll be elements of audience coming through really clearly as well. In this final example, we're combining the use of Keynote, Notes, GarageBand and Clips, all to explore the theme of resilience. Starting off with Keynote, that could be an iPhone app prototype with clickable links that the children have created, possibly using a template from the teacher, to explore resilience there. Maybe they're going to demonstrate their understanding of resilience through the Notes app. That could be a sketch of what resilience means to them, or maybe a short poem. In GarageBand, they could be interviewing family or class members and then creating their own podcast based around the idea of resilience. And finally, in Clips, they could create a movie with videos of community members and school peers explaining what resilience means to them and how they've demonstrated it in their lives.